As I understand, I'm the first Transcom commander, perhaps, to be speaking at this event. I suppose now that people are paying more attention to logistics, Jim has finally decided to send me an invite. So thank you, Jim.
Yes, ma'am.
Look, it's a great privilege to be here. On the strength of our logistical competence rests the ability to employ the finest fighting force on the planet, securing America's position as a global leader, an aspiration that many nations hold, but none can match. Without fail, our team leads the broader Joint Deployment Distribution Enterprise to conduct globally integrated mobility operations and provide enabling capabilities to project and sustain the joint force in support of national objectives. Almost every joint force mission starts and ends with U.S. Transcom. With the help of our commercial industry partners, our air, rail, sea, and surface capabilities ensure that the humanitarian aid and combat power emanating from the United States reaches their intended destinations. From Kabul to Kyiv, our own resilient team of logistics professionals continually exceed expectations, and they make history by ensuring that hope and victory are assured for our senior leaders, our allies and partners, and most importantly, the American people. To maintain unrivaled strategic advantage to posture and sustain forces over global distances through natural disasters, pandemics, conflicts, peace, and war. And while defending the homeland, we must preserve our logistical dominance. Lessons abound with historical examples of logistics' critical role on and off the battlefield. Given the context of current events, I want to quote one of our greatest wartime leaders. Employing one of his more colorful metaphors, Sir Winston Churchill prose, "Victory is the beautiful, bright-colored flower. Transport is the stem without which it could never have blossomed." Yet even the military student often forgets the far more intricate complications of supply. Regardless of the mission, success depends on a nation's capacity and capability to transport and supply its forces. Russia's challenges clearly demonstrate Churchill's maxim, despite their secure interior lines. Meanwhile, Transcom has delivered millions of small arms, artillery rounds, thousands of vehicles, and other weapon systems from around the world. The entire enterprise proudly continues to enable Ukraine's national defense that in turn delivers success for our allies and partners. Despite the significant demands of the European theater, Transcom continues to execute our global mission. In all theaters, we supported joint and combined exercises with geographic combatant commands, including bilateral multi-domain maneuvers to increase the combat readiness and interoperability of the U.S. and our allied and partner nations. Our commercial and military aircraft airlifted infant formula to ease the supply chain burdens, and within 24 hours of notification, we delivered urban search and rescue teams to support Turkey following the devastating earthquake there. The air refueling fleet enabled the readiness training and global reach of airlift, ISR, fighter, and bomber aircraft with their cumulative deterrent effects. These feats all require Transcom's air, land, and sea components, from deployed joint planners to thousands of military and civilian aircraft, vessels, trucks, and trains every day. From combined training to crisis, Transcom delivers all forms of power for this nation. In the context of global competition, the PRC recognizes Transcom's critical role in the American power paradigm. With 85% of the U.S. combat forces in the mainland, all major weapons systems require Transcom to be a credible deterrent. The PRC understands that to compete effectively, the U.S. must have agile, resilient, survivable, and sustainable logistics, all required to underwrite our lethal force. For that reason, they have custom designed their kinetic and non-kinetic capabilities to target our lines of communication. And you've heard a lot about this. Contested logistics, from the homeland to delivery, is now a reality for every major operation. If the associated threats and the logistical demand is not sufficiently mitigated, almost every aspect of the mobility enterprise will incur increased risk to mission. Consequently, this elevates risks for our combatant commanders. Based on our extensive assessments, we know the Joint Force requirements will challenge our experience and our capabilities. In non-permissive environments, the ability to generate momentum in compressed timeframes to more destinations with our finite capacity will be an imperative. However, with the right support, we believe our significant opportunities exist to exploit our expertise. So to make this a reality, we're focused on developing and rehearsing mobility concepts that will support joint force maneuver in a contested environment. With our priorities and warfighting framework nested within the National Defense Strategy's strategic ways, TRANSCOM is dedicated to ensuring the enterprise is ready to accomplish the mission when called upon. Through this framework, we plan and execute operations through global posture, global mobility capacity, and our ability to command and control and integrate our forces to meet the Joint Force Commander intent. Through the framework, our posture is the foundation of our formidable power projection capability and relies on access, basing, and overflight. This begins at home with our installations, our ports, our highways, and our pipelines and rail infrastructure to be able to mobilize to a port. Internationally, our ability to leverage these distributed and scalable logistics networks is highly dependent on a deep bench of diplomatically aligned allies and partners. This creates dense layers of contacts and contracts, military, commercial, ally, and partner, allowing us to set the globe. Through a whole-of-government approach, we must continue to expand and strengthen these connections as a flexible strategic advantage that sets America apart. With favorable posture, we can apply our global mobility capacity to maneuver forces and equipment. Detailed analysis continually reconfirms that our capacity is sufficient to meet demands, but we are at increased levels of risk in a contested environment. This includes the ability to scale through our emergency preparedness programs, such as the Voluntary Intermodal Sea Lift Agreement, the Civil Reserve Air Fleet, the Voluntary Tanker Agreement. These all provide assured access to commercial capacity and services that are needed to support the Department of Defense contingency requirements. The combination of our organic logistics fleets and these commercial capabilities must continue to present a credible deterrent for delivering forces, regardless of the environment. So achieving this end requires proactive efforts to recapitalize and modernize our capacity. My highest concerns lie in the reduction in capacity and readiness of our sea lift and air refueling fleets. In 10 years, more than 50% of our U.S. government-owned sea lift ships will reach the end of their service life. For this reason, TRANSCOM supports the Navy's strategy to recapitalize the fleet by acquiring used sea lift vessels from the commercial market and to provide the Secretary of Defense discretionary authority to purchase foreign-built used ships without limitation on number, to ensure the flexibility to purchase them when we have favorable market conditions. The Department is presently authorized to purchase only 9 vessels, and working with the Maritime Administration, we are currently executing the purchase of 2 used roll-on, roll-off vessels, and in the process of 3 roll-on container vessels. But the retirements are currently set to outpace recapitalization. So to preserve the capacity and readiness, we're advocating for accelerating the 2-ship-a-year recap rate and reconsidering currently scheduled vessel retirements. Increasing our ability to transport fuel is also critical. Recent congressional authorization allows us to expand the tanker security program from 10 to 20 U.S. flagged vessels. We're working to retrofit the first 10 ships for underway refueling operations in a contested environment. This will allow us to meet DoD requirements, reduce strategic risk, and develop an international trade presence in the Pacific. In the air refueling fleet is our most stressed capability. Joint force projection absolutely relies on air refueling as the backbone of rapid global mobility. Our capacity must remain credible to ensure that we can cover multiple simultaneous global requirements. This is where I have daily and wartime concerns. To meet the significant joint and combined air refueling requirements, TRANSCOM supports the Air Force's continued efforts. Three-pronged. This includes the focused modernization of the fleet, specifically readiness, connecting the fleet, and survivability upgrades. Second, uninterrupted tanker recapitalization. And third, to echo General Brown, accelerated pursuit of the next generation air refueling system. The ability to rapidly move cargo via airlift also represents a vital dependency of the Joint Force. Moving outsized and oversized cargo early in a high-end conflict underscores the need for a robust, organic strategic airlift fleet to be able to carry out cargo movements that our commercial partners simply cannot. Tactical airlift requirements also constitute a large portion of the joint and services maneuver concepts, including transloading from other aircraft or vessels, patient evacuation, and distributed operations across a dispersed area. TRANSCOM's third warfighting element, global command, control, and communication, and integration, allows us to plan, coordinate, and synchronize the movement of our military and commercial capacity at echelon. This begins with cyber mission assurance and digital modernization to mitigate malicious cyber activity. In partnership with our commercial transportation partners, cybercom, and intelligence agencies, we share threat information, best practices, and updates on our implementation of our cybersecurity frameworks, such as Zero Trust, in order to reduce disruption across the net. We fully embrace DoD's Artificial Intelligence and Data Accelerator Initiative to improve our data maturity posture and set the foundation for future analytic opportunity. This is the first crucial step in using data as a strategic asset and machine learning capabilities to accelerate our decision-making. TRANSCOM is accelerating our identification as a data-driven organization with the capabilities, tools, and culture to analyze data faster than our competitors can match. Future operations will also require a high degree of battle space awareness to align scarce mobility resources with the greatest strategic needs. Integration into battle networks, resourcing cryptographic modernization, and ensuring resilient position, navigation, and timing is a requirement for our platforms and our personnel. In closing, TRANSCOM recognizes that the enduring advantages that we build through our warfighting framework reinforces integrated deterrence and reduces the possibility of conflict. But we cannot lose the sight of the fact that for decades, our transportation and logistics prowess, conducted in permissive environments, has masked operational risk in a manner we can no longer afford. The allure of battle and the misplaced belief in swift victory has frequently obscured the physical realities of war. Throughout history, the ability to leverage logistics has delineated those nations prepared to fight a war with those prepared to win one. TRANSCOM is confident that we'll remain ready now in the future to transport the joint force at a time and place of our nation's choosing to deliver hope, deterrence, and when necessary, victory. Thanks again for the opportunity. I look forward to your questions. Together we deliver.
Can I throw the first one?
Bet.
Can you just give us a really kind of a snapshot of the day-to-day from your 5 a.m. in the morning to 11 o'clock at night after training, and then just the comparison of the magnitude of the challenges that we would face if we were trying to have that fight in the Mekong region now.
Yeah, thanks. First, I want to just say I'm super proud of the men and women of Transportation Command and our 130,000 folks around the globe, active, reserve, civilian, military, that make this happen and make it look easy. What I'm talking about is Ukraine, when I think about the European theater. When I think about the Indo-Pacific, as you know, it's vast distances. There's also not a lot of ground lines of communication, which we really enjoy in the European theater, right? So I think about posture. I think about our ability in the Indo-Pacific. There are not as many large logistics hubs from which to project power. And I think about the geometry of the fight. Access spacing and overflight is critical. And without it, it's not guaranteed in conflict, and without it, it can radically change the geometry of the fight. And think about our capacity, our ability from a strategic airlift standpoint to be able to deliver at velocity, at tempo, into the theater, which will require the entirety of our organic fleet and our Civil Reserve air partners. And we have to set the conditions to ensure that our Civil Reserve partners can fly. In other words, we have to ensure that we have lower risk areas that they go into, which is going to increase the requirement for organic lift. I had the same concerns on sea lift. The first pump out on sea lift, it's a longer voyage into the Pacific than it is into Europe. And given our readiness rates, I'm concerned about making that first pump. And air refueling. This is a time and space problem. This is booms in the air in physical spaces, which are much, much wider than what I'm seeing in the European theater that I'm concerned about. And I think about my intra-theater lift, right? All of the service concepts require more dispersion, smaller units, more places, more maneuver, for which we'll have to support. So pulling all of that together means that I have to be able to sense the battlefield environment and be able to place this limited capacity at the right place at the right time, requiring assured command and control and integration into all the functions. I have to be able to see all of the battle space and have assured connection, assured communication down to the tactical level, as well as an ability to understand the data and to be able to predict where we need to go, so that we can assure that the Joint Force Commander is successful in whatever portion of the operation they're in. And finally, in my new role as the Global Bulk Fuel Manager, I'm concerned about fuel. We enjoy quite a bit of good infrastructure in Europe with pipelines and refinery capability for fuel. This is not the case in the Indo-Pacific. I'm concerned about the risk we're taking in the Indo-Pacific. Where's the fuel, the infrastructure, our ability to move it in a contested environment, and to meet the needs of the joint force in this, again, we use the most amount of fuel, and this will be a tough fight without it. So prioritizing fuel around the globe is something that I'm working pretty heavily on. So thanks for that question.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, ma'am. John Ponce with SAIC. So I think you pretty much answered most of my questions just now. But I'm going to ask it anyway because I think there's a nuance to it. So as you look at the Pacific, what is your greatest challenge there as it pertains to our allies in logistics as well as what you just said? And secondly, and you may not be able to share this, but what do you see as China's big issue? We thought Russia could do anything, at least on the border, but we found out they can't. So what do we know about China?
Yep. So thanks. On the allies and partners, we absolutely have to work on increased interoperability when it comes to logistics. Some say interchangeability. This is our ability to have them not only service our airplanes, but additional agreements which will allow us to essentially provision forward for the majority of our supplies. We have to think about how we're going to move energy around as well. So who's with us, right? Who's thinking, who's doing that innovation? We're doing that right now with some key allies in the Pacific. So I guess when it comes to that, the big picture is how do we exercise that? How do we know we can have it? How do we know that they'll be able to bring it, right? So our presence in the Pacific during competition is really going to help us during conflict and the work we do now. So you'll see a lot of that in the Pacific Deterrence Initiative, more funding to be able to do those exercises and experiment with new kinds of things to close those gaps. We absolutely will be depending on them, and I'll be depending on them also for sea lift and airlift. We think about, we have robust agreements in Europe with NATO, and we're trying to replicate those in the Pacific. So I think that's going to be very helpful for us to bring us closer together in the Pacific. On the China side, we've set up a community of interest from an intelligence standpoint. We're doing red logistics, try to understand what they have, what's their game. We certainly are learning from Russia and what they are doing and what they're not doing, what they're concerned with. And so we're looking for reflections. I can't, that's about as far as I can go, but know that they have been watching us for 30 years, right? They know that we can marshal our forces and be in their backyard in 72 hours, it's a deterrent. So they are going after and developing capabilities that will directly disrupt, degrade, or deny our ability to get in there, to include things like access, spacing, and overflight. Like I said, if we lose a key partner, the geometry of the battle changes. And because of the expanse of the Pacific, a single partner not allowing us access could be a game changer for the Joint Force Commander. So my job is to increase resilience, increase those nodes, increase those contacts and contracts, so if I can't go this way, I can go this way and still meet Commander's intent. Thanks.
John?
Hi, Chris Gordon of Space Forces Magazine. Regarding China ports, obviously they funded ports, they may own ports, but how concerned are you about Chinese technology in American ports or allied ports that they may be exploiting vulnerabilities you know about or don't know about?
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, the digital Silk Road is alive and well. Everyone was watching the infrastructure. Look, China has some of the biggest shipping companies. They build over 80% of the cranes that are managed there on the docks with all the software to make that happen. And so I am very concerned because all of those companies are state-owned enterprises, and as you know, that data becomes exposed and can provide vulnerabilities both on an economic standpoint and from a military standpoint. So through our community practice, we have been looking into where these capabilities are, what infrastructure is owned by China. And you know we've done some of that work here in the United States. Actually, there's a whole government effort that's getting after Chinese investment and subsidiaries and trying to determine where they are. Yes, they're here in the United States. Yes, they're in U.S. ports. And yes, they're around the world. So as we bring this to the attention of our allies and partners, they look into it. What we're trying to do is mitigate the risk of that, and I think that we have real capability to do that. Frankly, part of that risk is having a reliable and capable sea lift force with our own cranes, right? And we do roll on, roll off, which is really awesome, right? It allows us to pull up to a port and roll off and not use those cranes, because again, to use those cranes, they can sense what's inside the ships, and that data becomes available to anybody on that network. So we are concerned about it. That's not the only thing. That's not the only way that China is getting into some thoughts and getting after it. But this is about data, right? And ensuring that we have trusted data and it's encrypted and only need to know so that we don't inadvertently provide a national security opening or a vulnerability.
Yes, ma'am. We have time for one more, and then I'm going to unleash the audience for a quick 5-minute break.
Hey, John, Tony Capaccio of Bloomberg. Can you talk a little bit about the role of sea lift in supplying Ukraine, one? And then two, on NGAS, the issue of survivability and decreasing the profile of a tanker. General Carlton Everhart a few years ago talked about cloaking technologies to lower the radar signature of a tanker, a la Star Wars-y type of stuff. Is that progressed to a point where that may be a viable technology?
Yeah. Yeah, so Tony, you're moving around. Okay.
You train yourself, right?
No, yeah. Sea lift. Look, we've flown over 1,000 airlift sorties and about 65 sea lift lifts for Ukraine. For airlift sorties, 75% of those were done by our commercial partners. For sea lift, 80% of the voyages were done by our commercial partners. Do you see how integrated we are and how we have to preserve that capability and capacity? So it's really important. We are very tied in with them, and it's been very, very helpful to do that work. So they've done a lot of work, and my kudos go to the Maritime Nation for all their great work. With respect to NGAS, we absolutely have to accelerate to get to those capabilities. Why? Look, the world is changing, the strategic environment is changing, our ability to what we're going to refuel, think NGAD, right? A family of systems that we have to refuel, manned and unmanned, in locations and under threats that we are still even dreaming about right now, right? So as we test out what are new capabilities, certainly a level of lower signature is important. But I think of NGAS, Next Generation Air Refueling System, as a family of systems yet, right? We're still trying to determine what that requirement is, and that's what the COCOMs do, right? We look to see what we're refueling, what are the CONOPS, what's the strategic environment 30 years from now, and then what are we going to develop to do that? So I do see it as a family. In some cases, Tony, we're still going to have to do air refueling to big wing capabilities and over the US or over places that won't have those kinds of threats. But certainly there will be areas that will be highly contested that will require a different CONOP and a different capability. So that's how we're looking there. And I will leave it to the services to talk about the stealth technology.
Yeah, that was brilliantly spoken.
I'm trying to clap. There, man.